Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I want to dedicate the topic as a follow-up on the one that I did on crisis. If you remember, a few weeks back I did one on crisis, which was not only talking about the situation that we've got in Bangladesh, but also across the world and the crisis that we've got that faces us today and problem across the world in the Muslim Ummah. And today I want to follow up on that from a different angle, because you might have heard in Bangladesh last week there was a demonstration on the 5th of May 2013, and you had police that opened fire on unarmed individuals who were asking for the demands according to Sharia. They were asking things to be done according to the laws of Allah Azza wa Jal, and fire was opened on them. Hundreds, perhaps thousands were killed that night. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about the crisis from a different angle. In particular, I want to talk about ourselves in the midst of this crisis and our involvement and what we can actually do. Not only that, but I want to take it to another level of understanding the crisis from many viewpoints, not only a political viewpoint, and to understand our future. And that's what today's talk is about. It's about our future in terms of this crisis. We're living in the West. What are we facing? Because I was thinking about it recently, and I thought to myself, how strange it is that you have a country that forms in 1971. I spent one whole year there, though I was born here in England. I spent a whole year there in 1986. So this is now, we're talking about 15 years in the formation of this country. And I spent a whole year living mainly in the suburban areas, in the village area, and occasionally visiting the cities and the towns and so on. So I've got a good idea about the city dwellers of that time and about the villages at that time. And I'm not just here to talk about Bangladesh. I'm here to talk about many countries that have gone through this phase. And I'm also here to talk about our country here and what we are going through as a phase, what we are facing and what we are about to face. Because when you start analyzing a society and development of the society, you start to realize that there are many fragments of that society that pull one another. And it's really important to understand that it's not just the political side of things. I know history always looks at things from a political perspective, but this is not the only angle that we should look at things. Politics and political motives and so on is a great influence. That there is no doubt in that. And in the last one that I did, one-off one I did on the crisis, I did touch on the political side of things. But today, what I want to do is from the crisis and look at it from a different angle. I want to look at other areas. So, for example, what is actually happening in the other parts of our society, of our development, that is leading to a crisis, which is not necessarily political, but which adds politically, or which adds to the political arena or to the political influence. So, for example, if I just start, when I was living in the rural area of Bangladesh for a year in 1986, what I saw was that I think it was almost unheard of anyone having a television. It was unheard of. And you've got to look at the effects of that on the life of those people that were around. Radios were around, and there were radio transmits and so on, and transmissions, and people did pick up there was a lot of reading of news through the papers and so on. That was definitely a case. But what you found is that, yes, there were people who were not so literate, I would say, a lot more illiteracy around. But you had a lot of focus and engagement in daily activities of upkeeping the society. For example, the farmlands were a lot more rich. The farmlands were a lot more rich. It's a total contrast today. And over the years that I've been visiting those areas, I've seen the contrast, I've seen what happens, because the next visit I made, a significant one, which I stayed again for one whole year, was in 97, which is about a decade later. And I saw a big difference. And what I'm not here just to talk about that. I'm here to talk about our society over here, the Western sort of world, and where we're going. So you'll see the pattern of thinking in a little while. So you see that you've got, in 1986 or 87 when I was there, you found most of those people had a very rich farmland life in the villages. And the city life was something which was attractive, but it wasn't the only thing that everyone was desperately trying to get into, right? So it was something that people were after. But there was rarely, you could see that people were more interested in the values of their culture, values of their backgrounds, even if people weren't religiously attached. Even if people weren't religiously so attached, you still found that there's a cultural element that binds people together. Now this is the thing that I need to discuss, which is in these Western countries, we've come over here, and I think we are struggling to try and keep our ties with our culture. And my advice to all individuals is that you should and you must try and keep together back with your culture, if it's one that has got values that add on to those elements. So for example, in my culture, in all the Asian, I think, or the Indian subcontinent of India, you find that people are very much attached in ways to one another. It's like you really know who your uncle is, who your nephew is. You really have these good blood ties that you keep together. You really would go out to look after one another and do what you can for one another as long as they're related to you. This is a thing that people have as a loyalty thing. Over in the Western world, you don't have that. There's a big crisis here. I mean, we know of so many elderly people in the Western world who are, not necessarily from the Asian subcontinent, not necessarily from the Arab world and so on, who live a life all alone in the late years of their life, and they struggle to go up the stairs, they struggle with many things, shopping and so on, but they don't have that upkeeping and that bond with their family, that the families around them. It's very sad to see in hospitals. I think you would see the same thing in hospitals. When an Asian person goes in the hospital, you find, people, the nurses have to say, hang on, there's a barrier here. We can't have, no more than 2 please at a time. But when it's a non-Asian or non-other not just Asian, but other groups, when it's completely a Western type of culture, they probably see a person a day, if they're very lucky. And if not, they're probably seeing a person coming to see them once a week, which is really sad. But what we need to seriously think about is, what are those elements that are binding us together to try and keep the upholding of these things? Because religion is something that, yes, we are Muslims, we are attached to Islam, but is it, I know in Islamic teaching, you're supposed to look after the sick, you're supposed to look after the elderly, you're supposed to look after people and so on, that's all there. But how many people are doing these things religiously? And how many people are doing these things as a culture? Or as a form of respect, because they're part of a group of people? This is a really important question, because what you find is, in this country even, many people, they might say, yeah, Islamically we do this, Islamically we do that, but really they're doing it because they're part of that group of people. There's a lot of people doing this. There's a lot of people doing this, and you need to open your eyes and see, what would it be different? Like, for example, if all those people who he goes to Jummah with, if they all stopped coming to Jummah, would he still go to Jummah? Because if that was the case, then he's doing it religiously. But if he's going to Jummah because he's got all these other, the culture, you know, that society that's doing it, and he needs to be part of that society, and he's doing it partly because of that, then it might be that that is the biggest pull. But what I want to say to you is that it is important that we keep both elements alive. So you keep the Islamic side alive, and we need that to become the focus. Yes, I agree with you. But be honest with me, 80-90% of Muslims don't even know what their real deen is. You know, they don't know what practice should go with it. So, but those 80-90% of Muslims, there's a far great population amongst them that is doing something that is perhaps because of the culture. You see weddings, funerals, all these societal functions, they get affected by how that particular culture is going about doing those things. So anyway, going back to those rural sort of countries, what I saw was that there's a massive difference in 10 years where even things that, you know, the clothing has changed more to the city life. So people are more attached to wearing more clothing to the sort of city life. I think in 97 when I visited, there was a lot more TVs around, even in the village areas. So it's almost like every village had a TV. Every village had like 2 TVs, some 3 TVs in some areas. But you saw a massive difference because of the TV. Now, I don't want to blame you all on the TV, but I will say definitely that there is a massive culture that is being displayed by the TV. It demands that people be at a certain way. Now, in those countries, obviously, what was it? It was like some guy wears a smart, you know, or some, you know, what we might see as backward shirt or something with long collars. But for them, it's like smart collar, smart shirt. Everyone's going to go out or many people will go and try and find that smart shirt, that smart trouser, that smart belt, that smart, you know, hairstyle. They want to be up with that. What's happening in our countries? And it's more dangerous because whatever they faced 30 years back, 20 years back, we faced before that, maybe 40 years back. Whatever we're facing today, they're going to be facing it in about 10, 20 years' time. And well, how do we see that where we're going? Because I'll be straight with you. A lot of the cultural aspects that are being portrayed in the MTVs, in the music industry, on the TVs, in whatever is happening there, we will be facing children who will grow up to be adults who will be completely molded in those things or would want those things, right? So for example, right now, you know, you get loads of children that will want the particular hairstyles that they see, you know, from these rap artists or from these football players or because they've become a kind of a role model for them. And what we need to see is, well, where is this going next? Where is it going next? I tell you one thing that is happening definitely is that over the last 20 years, since the world has become a lot more techy, has got a lot more technology, it's the biggest crisis that we are facing, the biggest disease actually in the Western world, which is moving across towards the Eastern world, is individualism. And all these gadgets, they demand that every person remains individual from another person. So these phones that we've got, these devices that we've got where people are using them and they're becoming sort of, you know, they're kind of finding that the whole world is on this, that's fine. But you've got more and more of this where husbands and wives, children, you know, siblings, parents and their young ones, they're kind of spending time within the same compound but yet separate from one another. And the whole so for example, they're all in the same house, so one's on the computer just stuck, you know, just looking at a screen. Another one's on a TV and just looking at a screen. So these two are really not communicating one another. Another one's on the phone and just texting and just looking at the phone. So again, there's no real communication. Another one could be on another gadget or phone or something, or stuck his iPads or playing his PS3 or whatever it is. Again, stuck with, you know, that. And what it's doing is it's fragmenting that unity that we would have had. Otherwise, you would have had a family that are actually talking to each other, that are finding each other's problems, that are talking and knowing how the day went, and just, how are you, how did your day go? And a lot of this has disappeared. Families eating on a table together. I remember when I was young, all the time, the whole family would come together, and I'm trying to keep up this practice in my house. We eat together, and I'm sure some of you families do as well. But I'll be honest with you, there are families out there that are stopping that. In fact, what makes it worse for us in this country is when you add other elements, like for example, you add the ghetto kind of type of area, or when I did my studies in psychology, I found this. This was kind of a shock to me, but I thought, what, seriously, this is the case, and it sort of woke me up. What was it? What am I talking about? Well, here I am in one of the modules, and I'm studying this, and they're talking about kids who don't perform so well in classes, and they're looking at the number of reasons why they don't perform. So they're looking at the socio dynamics of this child and what's going on in his life. So when I'm reading this, and these are huge pieces of work that we're studying, and I'm going through it in the class, and I'm thinking, yeah, I know all of this stuff. Yeah, I know all of this stuff. And I was thinking, okay, the next thing they mentioned is, a council house, 3-bedroom house, but then you've got more individuals than the 3 bedrooms, and you've got all these other council houses, and then you've got, where the car park is, or where the play area is, or where the small alleyway is. You've got kids hanging around there, and then you've got, kids who will hang around till late, and kids who don't study too much, but they're more involved in the outside playing. And you've got those parents who've got low incomes, and those low incomes who may have low expectation of their kids. And when those kids go to school, they've probably got a society in the school of kids who see the educated child as a boffin. It's like, he's a bit too clever, man. He's getting a bit too, he's taking it too far. Why doesn't he relax a bit? So the educated child will be the one who's bullied, and the ones who are not really educated will be the ones who are having their free time, fun time, low expectancy, low grades and all that, and hitting a crisis which they can't even see. And when I'm studying all of this, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I could tell you more about this. I could tell you what happens here, and I could tell you, I could tell you how it feels to be like that. And yeah, you didn't have to do 10 years of studies to find this all out. You could have just come and asked me, right, about all this stuff. And I'm next thing I'm realizing, hang on a minute, I'm the odd person here. I grew up in one of those areas in this country where you had all of these surrounding you, all these things surrounding you. So it's not, too much before you realize that, what? Okay, I'm talking about this by myself, right? All this true about me. How many other Muslim children? How many other Muslim beings? I'm in my late 30s now. How many other people have gone through that and have come to a stage in their life where they've kind of messed up? They've messed up. Now, what does that add to the ummah and the society that we've got? Then, for example, when you've got societies, I want to give you an example, like in this country, you've got another form of crisis. And I think in America and Canada, you've got another different type of crisis, right? In America and Canada, because the houses are so far away from one another, and both parents in many areas are working, both of them are working, you've got a different type of problem there. Yes, you might have educated children, but educated doesn't necessarily mean they are nurtured. Educated doesn't necessarily mean that they are devoted to God. Educated doesn't necessarily mean that they are loyal to parents. Educated doesn't mean that. Educated means that they are educated with the studies that they've done. That's what it means. So educated could mean that they're heading for a good salary, they're heading for for a good grades, good salary, good job, all that. Fine. But what's coming after that? Where's the uphold of the society? Where is it all coming together? Or is it going apart? Is it going apart? So that's like, I'm talking about American, Canada in one aspect, but here I want to talk more about here because I'm living here in England. You've got certain areas that alhamdulillah are kind of affluent areas. And in the affluent areas you've got one type of problem, and in the non-affluent areas you've got another type of problem. But in both of them you've got the pros as well. So in the affluent areas, they're doing well by sending their kids, giving them private tuition, making sure that they, do all their, get all the good grades, get a good sort of, college, good university, good job and so on. That's all good, and most of these kids who grow up in affluent societies, they're not your druggy kids, they're not your lost, souls of the streets, okay? They've got some good manners and so on, that's all fine. And the other side, where you've got the non-affluent areas, the good thing about that is that many of them are religiously higher than the affluent societies. You get this one problem. Affluent societies, rich societies, they somehow compromise or start to compromise on religion more than the non-affluent or the poor sort of suburban areas. Now, on that side, the poor side, you've got a lot of kids who grow up and the value of deen or religion will be high. However, and I want to say this, is that many of these parents, unfortunately, they pick and choose what things should be religious and what things shouldn't. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. So when it says religion, it means that yes, the dad dictates what part of religion should be the religious aspect that should control his kids, himself and his wife, which is another crisis. But besides that crisis, because they're living in dense Muslim populated societies, and because of the thinking capacity in many of these is relatively low, what does that do? That creates low thinking, low achievements, low qualities. And I'm being serious, I'm not saying they're all low, right? There are some individuals who are still, spearing ahead and so on. I don't want to name you cities, but I just want you to think about it. Because if I name a city here, they're going to say, oh my God, he put our city down and he said this about, us. And I don't want to do that. But I know quite a few cities in England who have got these dense Muslim sort of populated areas of Muslims. But you know what? You kind of find that why is it that they've got loads more druggies there? It's a serious crime and it's happening. They've got a lot more drugs, kids are growing up and some of them are becoming drug dealers. You've got kids growing up and fornication is like a next thing that's happening all over. They kind of cocoon themselves thinking every other house is kind of Muslim and we're kind of living in an area that is really religious. And on the outside of it, you kind of think, wow, this is the place I want to be. But when you get there and you live there, you kind of find that yes, you might have a lot more niqabis and you might have a lot more sort of, this is my zone, your zone, whatever, and I keep myself here and this is my religion, I'm practicing very devoutly, I'm doing it. But behind the curtains, things are going on. Some of these hospitals in these areas, you kind of find that there's a high abortion rate. Why is there a high abortion rate? And who are doing this? Is it the non-Muslims in this area? Suddenly they got all crazy? No, well, it's the Muslims that are, some of these Muslims are living in these areas. So that's a downside to it. To have this. Now, again, there's pros and cons because when you look at the mosques in those areas, there's a lot more mosques, there's a lot more madrasas, there's a lot more teaching, there's a lot more learning going on. So don't ignore that fact. There's a lot more of this. There's a lot more bayans and lectures and all that. But you kind of find some of those kids around those areas, they can sometimes become deaf to it. Why? The question is why? Because if you give too much of anything to anyone, they're going to hate it. You try and if a guy loves his chicken tikka, you give him everyday chicken tikka, one day he's going to puke up. And he's going to say, don't you ever show me, right? Bring near me, right? Let me smell a chicken tikka in my life again. Otherwise I'm going to puke, right? So you got this, seriously, you can't give too much of something to someone. If you give too many Islamic lectures, too many Islamic things to some without the break of entertainment, without the break of feeling relaxed, without the space of moving sometimes away from it and coming back to it. If you give too much of anything, they'll be sick of it. Even Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his hadith of Bukhari, he used to give his Islamic discourses and he used to say a hadith, but moderately. He used to watch. Once his Sahaba become bored, he would stop. It's in Sahih Bukhari. مَخَافَةَ السَّامَّةِ عَلَيْنَا. He would stop. And sometimes he says in Ahadith, he would engage with them. He would suddenly, he'll stop talking about Akhirah, talking about Allah, and then end the conversation and then say, how's your farm coming along? How's the crops in the field? Seriously, this is an Ahadith. How are the crops coming along in the farm, in the field? He would ask that question. Why? Because he himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, knew that you can't feed a people too much of one thing. Otherwise they would you just naturally don't want too much of anything. You give anyone too much sleep, he'll hate it. Too much food, he'll hate it. Too much entertainment. You kind of take one person to a I don't know, entertainment park, and you take them around the roller coaster again and again and again and again. After a while, man, I tell you, their head's going to be spinning, and they're going to say to you, look, I don't want to see another roller coaster, man. There's too much. You can't give too much of anything. But anyway, coming back to this thing about affluent and non-affluent society, a crisis that we're in, and we've got to look at what's coming after this, is we're in a situation where a lot of the Muslims and so on, when we're developing and things are happening around us, they don't know how to really react. The deep think tank type of thinking that should happen, it's not there. Why? Because the religious institutions that have been created to teach these people, you got to look at what's been going on in there. And I'm going to talk about very briefly about a crisis that started 100 years back. 100 years back. And I'll be very clear with you. If you look at the early scholars of India, they were some great figures that were produced. Why were they produced? Because they came from good backgrounds. They weren't selected because they were the last one left in the family. I think Allama Tanwi, in about 100 years ago, he mentioned this. He said that what we're getting in our madrasas, 100 years ago he mentioned this, what we're getting in our madrasas right now are the leftover, unintelligent children of the family. So what the fathers are doing is they're saying that, okay, my bright child, that one, madrasa. Next one, he's intelligent. Sorry, my bright child, the first one, he says to him, university, okay? The next one, he said bright, he says university. Next one, really good, okay, university. And next one, not so bright, what should I do with him? Madrasa, right? Let's send him to the madrasa. I mean, he'll be something, right? I mean, he can pray to God, right? He can, ask, for Allah's sake, people will give him something. How's he going to find a job and all that kind of thing? So when Allama Tanwi saw that a lot of poor students from these backgrounds where you've got low expectations of the kids, and those kids are not too intelligent, they're not too bright, they're coming and filling the madrasas up. He said, we're heading for a crisis in the next couple of generations. What did he say? He said, well, these kids are going to grow up to become scholars, and what they will do is they will, because they had a lack of money in their lives, money will become a key thing that they want to acquire when they become scholars. And you can see, some of those, ill-learned scholars, not all of them, who came out from Indo-Pak to these countries, the first thing they had that dollars rolling in their eyes. Right? And they wanted that. Second thing he said is that these pupils who will become scholars, there's a big danger that the only way they will be able to keep their own livelihood and the societies around them, because they haven't got that intelligence, that brightness, the only way they'll be able to do it is to try and manipulate their society with sectarian arguments. So they'll say, you are from my background, we are these, we hate that other masjid and the people of the other masjid. Don't you dare walk in that masjid. Don't read another piece of literature. You are mine, I am yours, and I control you. I am your imam. And you step out of this, you have gone gumrah, you've gone off the path, and you've finished and so on. So the only way they can do this is to keep that crowd in sectarian disagreements. And Indo-Pak has produced hundreds and thousands of that. In fact, we are in the middle of this mess. Kids are growing up in this country, don't know, oh my God, shall I choose this one? Should I choose that? My dad says that's a wrong masjid, and my mom says this is this, and so on. They're confused. So now what I want to get back to is the institutions that produce these type of scholars who are there to teach in those areas, teaching these low expected sort of families and children, they together have done what? they think on the low level. I'm sorry to put it like this. So, you know, for example, you might have a crisis. Let me give you a typical example, yeah? You'll have a crisis where you'll have, you know, a political situation that is against us. Maybe they saw our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what will you find that this side will do? You know, the ones that have come up from these sort of ghetto sort of areas, from the low expecting sort of areas, what will they do? They don't know nothing more than to fight. They're from areas where they're always fighting on the streets. So you get those people as community leaders, or people who are not even community leaders, but they want to do something about the society. All they know is how to fight. They know how to raise their voice. They know how to say strong words. But they can't really win the argument through intellectual debate. In the Western world, you will not be able to win without having a balance of two things. You've got to have a spiritual soul, and you've got to have the intellectual capacity to overcome whatever danger is ahead of us. If you don't have the two balanced together, it's not going to work. And why I've added the spiritual essence is because there's a big void of this in the Muslim Ummah at the moment. And without this, no matter how much media representation you've got of Islam, no matter how many debates you've got on the TV, and how many people are out there to represent us and to say all the good arguments, without the spiritual essence, nothing will happen. Because it's a disconnection from God. That's another sort of crisis. Now bring this back to the other side of the world, the eastern side. How do I relate it to the eastern side is, over in Bangladesh, for example, in Pakistan or these areas, these politicians, where do you think the politicians came from? The politicians who are currently running these countries, many of them are from affluent backgrounds. Being from affluent backgrounds, what normally happens is religion becomes low straight away. Right? They might teach their children religion, but it becomes private tuition. You know what? There's a whole thesis about this private tuition. Now, of course, we have private tuition, but when it comes to religion, if you've got a choice of having private tuition separately in a house to some children, and you've got a choice of sending them to the masjid, you'll all agree with me that it's better to send it to the masjid. Why? Because the masjid keeps that bond. Masjid brings that unity together of Muslims. Masjid brings that whole thing of community sort of presence, where you've got to recognize that this religion is practiced by so many people. You have to come together with Salatul Jama'ah, with the congregational prayer. You have to respect one another. You have to live with one another. All these things come around the masjid. Once you break those children away from the masjid, they're not part of it. So what happened is, I still forgot to say one thing. I was saying that 100 to 150 years ago, what India produced was scholars who came from a good sort of affluent, some scholars came from affluent background, they weren't from poor backgrounds, and they become brilliant intellectual people. And I think in the last sort of 100 years, we have had a great degradation of this, degeneration of this, and we've had a lot less scholars of good intellectual capacity being produced, and a lot more of the lower thinking type being produced. And again, I don't want to say that I don't want to label people, names or institutions, anything like that, but I just want you to think that this is a crisis. So now when you look at the politicians, what's going on behind their backs? Well, behind their backgrounds is that they've got religion that plays a small part of their life, and you've got a lot that plays, all these other education. So, all these maths, English, science, history, politics, the world, and all that. That plays a massive part of their syllabus. Their whole aspiration of their parents is, better, you have to have good morals, be a good person, whatever. But one day, I want you to sort of, all it is you've got to become some kind of leader. You've got to become some kind of political leader. Now, what happens? Okay, they grow up. Their parents might have given them good, morals and so on, but the absence of a spiritual soul, when these children grow up and they get into the political arenas, what do they see? They see corruption. They see corruption over corruption. So even if somebody wanted to remain pure in that, he gets corrupted. It's environment. It's a crisis with that. So that's on the one side. On the second side, on the Madaris side, what's happened is what? Is that many of these madrasas are not really producing people to try and get into these political areas. They're not producing your MPs. They're not producing your, your people who are going to be your next political leader. Many of them don't. Now, some of them do become political leaders, but that's because of their own sort of gain. They become. But the institution itself is not producing that. What happens then? Well, what happens then is for decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, you do the sum yourself. You do the maths yourself. The colleges and universities are producing, individuals to go into the parliament building. The parliament building is going to rule the country. The madrasas are not necessarily being able to produce that material, or even people who will be intellectually be able to stand up to those people once those people start to make, bend the rules. The only thing they can possibly do is to raise their voice, shout, and now, do things physically, but not mentally. What happens then? Well, then, when the crisis comes, what will happen is the political parties will see these children and people, production of the mothers, all these rural societies, they'll see, well, there's no match. So they will just start to do what they want to do, because it's like they've got the power and these others don't have the power. And once you have that, what the Quran has said, that whoever has been given power, always, many of them will start to overcome others, overcome them through what? Through mockery. That's what will happen. The Quran has said that. Even the prophets face that. Now, the good thing still is that many of these poor people, the Madaris people, they've got religion inside them. And may Allah Azza wa Jal, increase the level of religion inside them. And if you've got any hope, then first it is from these poor backgrounds and from these poor people. But the crisis is still there. What I want to say to you brothers and sisters who are listening is that today, my brothers and sisters, we've got to wake up, right? There are families that are bringing their children up and they're not teaching their back home language. They're not teaching a second language. There are families who have brought up an entire generation, and that generation speaks, one language only, maybe the English language. Now, you have broken a massive part of your cultural ties because of that. There are families who have brought up children who are completely dressed, completely, modified to this side of the world. Now, what will happen in 20, 30 years, it's already coming to the surface. What will happen is you are going to get children who will grow up in a generation, 2 generations time, who will have nothing to do with the ties that their parents had beforehand. So already people are, what they're doing, there's Mother's Day, Father's Day. There's people who give that great significance. And what that's doing is that it's making some Muslims, it's not happening on a large scale, but I'm talking about the crisis will only be there in 20, 30 years time. May Allah, save us from it. But already they're giving preference to that, which means that their focus is going away from the day-to-day Father's Day and the day-to-day Mother's Day. Already when a father has passed away, a mother has passed away, people are thinking of the 1 year commemoration. So they'll come after 1 year, they'll do some kind of function to remember their parents. But, and many of the, I want to be very clear with you, many of the affluent, people, Muslim affluent sort of backgrounds, they do this a lot more than the non-affluent sort of background. So there's kind of a detachment to the prayers they're supposed to do on a daily basis is moving to a yearly basis. So what happens afterwards? Well, these children that are growing up, we haven't seen anything of technology yet. We haven't seen anything. Allahu A'lam, but I think, this virtual sort of world of having technology, it could grow even more, and the crisis then will be that they'll be sucked more into the individual worlds, but away from the real parts of what needs to be done in a society and for change. So how do we now do something that is different? Well, we need to go back to our roots. To avoid the clashes that we've got in many of these countries, we need a heavy influence with Islamic studies, Islamic learning. We need the molding of the Islamic self and the character. That is very, very important. There's no, we've got another big crisis that is around, has been around us, is that we've got parents who know Islam, who can tell you about Islam, but who don't practice Islam. The new generation, if that carries on, they will know bits and pieces of Islam, they can preach you Islam, but they may not necessarily fully practice that Islam. The way our 13th century forefathers have given us Islam, we need to go back to those roots. Before the age of technology, before the age of industry, before the age of steel and iron, before the mining sort of era, we need to look at that and see, well, what are their values? Their values were that these were the true values. The true values were that they were loyal to the family, right? The true values were that they put their time towards something that would be benefit to everybody. It's not benefit to themselves, but benefit to everyone. So the whole family unit and so on, or helping the society. The true values were that there were people who had a good time for religious devotion. They had a good time for religious devotion. I think that is very much breaking up, where people have got an hour here, an hour there, and so on, but not a daily sort of routine to that religious devotion. That is breaking up. What we need parents to seriously demonstrate to the children how they are spending religious time devoted to Allah, and not individual time devoted to the PS3, the games box, or the cube, or whatever it is, and the TV and the satellite and whatever else it is. We need to revert back. Once it reverts back, once we can see that the focus is religion, not just culture. We're not getting together because of culture. We don't want to get together because of this false sense of unity, because everyone's going to come together, we are together. No, we want Allah's words and the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's words to bring us together. So we need time, family time together, and those family times should be around building up the language, building up the structure of society, building up the things that keep us together, doing ta'aleem in the house, or making an awareness that this is because of Allah and His Messenger. So even to one another, even as adults, making sure that the du'as are there, the prayers are there, right? The little things, they all need to be revived in practice, not in knowledge only, in practice. The Quran tilawa daily, right? How many individuals in the house are doing that? Revive all of this. Then once you've got the religious side of things, you've got your good, your circle of study, your circle of reviving things, and lessen the other side. So we need to lessen the influence of these TVs, lessen the influence of these other technologies around us. Have proper quality time together as a family. When we've done that, and at the same time, our background, sort of, for example, in education, we need to have high aspiration education. To the families out there that are living in these societies where you're living in, normal sort of clustered societies, one of the advice I can give you is just get out of there, right? The longer you stay inside there, if it's not you, your kids will be affected. I know kids of the last generation who are not affected by drugs, but their kids are affected by drugs, who were saved by their parents before, like who would have been grandparents right now, right? Who were saved by them 20 years ago, but now there's no one to save them because of the way the structure is moving on. So we need high expectation in education. We need to get the best of education. I truly believe that. But at the same time, not to compromise on the religious aspects. Not to compromise any of that. The masjids, right? We need to start looking at different settings of masjids. And I wish, inshallah, I'm talking to you guys, and I had this wonderful Shaykh from Pakistan, Shaykh Zahid al-Rashidi. I once asked him, and I said to him, Shaykh, what do I do in terms of change and development of society and so on? And he gave some very short but powerful piece of advice. He said to me, Hassan, if you can change the current generation, he said, try. But he said, if they're not going to change, he said, leave them and work on the new generation. He said, the new generation, they're going to be young children. And they're going to be young people who will understand and who are likely to adopt what the old generation hasn't done, because the older person gets, the more set they get in their ways. The older a tree is, the more set it is in its way. It's very hard to bend a branch of a tree once it's fully grown. But if it's growing, you can easily just twist and bend the branch to whatever direction you want it. So he gave me this advice, and I can see a lot of truth in that advice, because the mosques that we've ended up with, we pour our monies in these masjids, right? Only for what? Only for prayer space. Extra prayer space. You already had like 500 prayer spaces. Oh my God, Jummah time, we've got a crisis, we can't hold on. All these musallis are praying outside, so let's donate, fine. And then what, you created now 1,000, altogether 1,000 prayer spaces. But look, where's the community center? Where's the place for the children? How are the children supposed to come to the masjid if you don't make a community center? And even some of these masjids, they make a community center, but they either don't have someone to run it, or they have someone to run it, but it really doesn't really get used so much because of the restrictions you get. They broke the table again. What are kids supposed to do? Come with a DIY kit and fix it for you. That's what they're made for. Kids are going to break these things. You buy it. I'm so surprised. Some of these mosques, I'm being serious with you. Some mosques I can name are sitting on £100,000. Just sitting on it. The committees are sitting on it. Some of these ones are sitting on £500,000. Some of them are sitting on 1 million. Some of them sitting on several £1 million. I mean, seriously, with that kind of money, you can buy another place, convert it into a community place, a community hall. You can get all the kids in there. You can pay somebody throughout the year 25,000, 30,000 salary just to look after these kids. You can pour money extra every year into 5 new tables, 10 tables here, 5 tables. You can do that. Table tennis tables, the football tables, the hockey, air hockey, whatever tables, the pool tables, whatever brings kids together, and do something for the girls as well. They need their own time, where they can have their games in their areas. Now, these mosques, seriously, you give me, right, £1 million, yeah? I wouldn't even have to spend £1 million for it. I spend half of that, and I'd inshallah do a decent job to try and get this thing done. Because without that, how are you going to bring these societies together? Come Dhuhr Salah in this masjid, any of these masjids, right? You will see mainly people with, let's start with, Dhuhr Salah, okay, you come here, you'll see elderly people, and a few people who are in some walking distance, few middle-aged people will come and join. Asr time, you'll see only some elderly, a couple of neighbors, wherever, will just come and join the prayer. Fajr time, the serious people, right? Elderly, some others from the community will come. Your mid-aged sort of people, they'll come. Yeah. Maghrib, you'll get a bit more. Isha, you'll probably get a bit less. But that's it. You look throughout the day. Yes, you got children that do come, mainly between 5 to 7, because the madrasa calls them, but they're not coming out of their accord. And why are they not coming out of their accord? Because that place has got too many restrictions. It's a place of prayer. That's what they know it as. You can't talk, you can't do whatever inside. Now, yes, of course, have the prayer place as it is, but you need a community center. You need a place for assistance and so on. Now, you got this, this country's got a serious crisis of some mosques saying that, don't you allow women ever in the masjid. Don't you allow children from this height and this age, don't let them in the masjid. You got certain masjids having signboards put up. And then the serious thing is, what's going to happen in 40, 50, where are those kids? Well, you haven't got in the masjid, so where are they? Well, I tell you where they are. They're selling drugs over there. That's where they are, right? They're seeing the next door girl over there, parks and this and that. That's where they are. If you can't keep them within yourself, they're going to be outside there, right? I want to talk about this whole thing, not only from a crisis that goes from the society, the households, but this in terms of the masjid. The madrasa is another one where it seriously needs to have people who care, are able to liaise with children that understand, are able to liaise with children that they're learning something which they can interpret into their real life. There's no point of me teaching them, right? There's no point of me teaching them. And some of these books, seriously, they need to move on. Okay, in India we got wells. We got wells in India, right? So you might sometimes just have a mouse that's fallen into a well, and you have to draw that water from the well, and then you have to calculate, well, how many buckets should I empty out before the water is now safe and clean for us to drink and to ghusl in. But when are you going to get that crisis in England? You got that crisis in England where you got a well outside here somewhere where something's fallen inside, a chicken's fallen inside, so you don't know how many buckets to take out, right? Some of these books that are being taught in some of these madrasas, they're still talking about wells and how many buckets to draw out if this animal falls in and that animal falls in and this animal falls in. Now, leave that as a subject. Whoever needs to study it or needs to know about it, they can know about it. But it shouldn't be like in every single, madrasa for children who are growing up in England and growing up in Canada and America, because they're not going to come across that. They've got taps in their homes, man. They're not going to see a mouse coming out the tap one day and, another day they see a crocodile coming out or something. I mean, what do you think this is, right? So the syllabus needs to be something that interprets real value into the society. It needs to be something that they can adapt to. Not only that, but the other side of it is we have got something to cater for our young people, in the madrasas, whatever model it is. But the middle-aged people, the old sort of people, they've got time, they come to the masjid and so on, and they find their little taleems and the things that they can sort of get to. But this middle age, that whole middle age, not much is there in our society for them. Seriously, there's not much in our societies for them. There needs to be, and I would love to have this, that every masjid would become a family masjid. So what that means is that you have your prayer space, yes, but you have all your other spaces for even having a dining area where families, how easy it would be for a whole community to say, oh, let's go to the masjid today. There's a £2.50 meal at the back. It's been cooked nicely. It's been cooked by it tastes nice, cooked nicely. You only have to pay £2.50, and I can eat. My kids can eat whatever, and we can be at the masjid. We can, kids can do their homework. If there could be a support mechanism, a masjid needs to be something where we can come together and different people can give their time to try and support these people together. So if that was to be the basis of our community, that will seriously bring a lot more value to us, because what we're all doing is we're all living individually, we've all got our private tutors, we've all got our private places, we've all got our private meals, our private techie things, and a private... What's it making it? Well, it's making us more individual. Now what's happening, to interpret this to what is coming ahead is, in 20, 30 years' time, in 20, 30 years' time, may Allah, save us from a further crisis. But I can't see, unless we change things around, I can't see how we're going to make ourselves any better in terms of, getting together and withholding the pressures that are on us. And what I think needs to happen is to put aside, I'll be clear with you, you got this gay rights bill at this moment, yeah? You've got this gay rights bill that's going through the parliament. The Christian priests, I think thousands of them have signed this letter to the government. I think several imams, hundreds of imams, I think about 400 imams or so, signed something. Fine. What we need to do is, apart from us trying to say, okay, we're proselytizing, or we're trying to call others to our deen and they're trying to call us to their deen, put that aside. We need platforms where we seriously are together as a community on a large basis. So that means when there's certain religious pressures that come on all religions, we need to already be there with a platform where the societies are working together. We should not see, honest to God, we should not see a difference where, I know on a small scale it matters, like, you've got your children mixing with other children and you don't know whether they're going to start eating pork tomorrow or whether they're going to start, swearing tomorrow. I know those things, crises are there. But on a more intellectual level, we can get together where we can form societies from different religions where any moment we're already together. We're already there to talk to the government. These things need to be there in place, where we don't have, seriously speaking, Muslims don't have a problem with non-Muslims. Non-Muslims really don't have a problem with Muslims. It's only what the media has made up and what they make you believe that is a crisis. But that is one thing that, we should have as a stance already there, so that we can stand up to these things. The other thing I would say is what we need, and this is something for us to seriously think about and change our condition is, you guys, alhamdulillah, especially, children who are listening to this, you are tomorrow's doctors, you are tomorrow's, engineers, you are tomorrow's biochemists, or wherever you are tomorrow, okay? You're going to become tomorrow lawyers and wherever else it is. Do something different, please. This last generation has pumped most of its money in the most common things. So masjid, if you try and call for monies towards masjid, you'll get 100 hands up straight away. They'll all donate. They've got this kind of a real value to the masjid. You try and get it for a madrasa, you'll probably get 20% of that. A madrasa or something, you'll get 25% of what a masjid will get. You try and create, right, something that, for the homeless people, these are part of our society. You try and create something for, to look after the homeless people, you probably not even get a percent. People don't even relate to it as a crisis. They'll say, oh, we've got plenty of homeless people back home. But hang on a minute. We want to, we've given a lot of money back home, and we're still giving, and don't stop giving your money back home. But we've got crisis here. We've got children running away from homes. We've got children that are running away from homes. We've got children we've got crisis we've got divorcee crisis. People don't want to talk about this. Imams don't want to address this. We have got a high percentage of divorcees, in households. And you know what they do? They will not want to admit to the fact that a divorce has taken place. They will not want to do it. They'll want to hide it. Now, we need support and care for many of these different backgrounds. One of the things that I think a big crisis is happening right now, which is in front of me, is the marriage thing, because there's so many small individual things of marriage and how to find your marital sort of spouse. It's becoming a real crisis in itself. What I would have loved is, all these masjids, they need a database throughout all the different masjids, and you just need every masjid to contribute from their database to other databases. And if together they could manage giving, saying that, look, we've got a 25-year-old here, if somebody, just look in the database, who's looking for a 25-year-old of this height, of this thing, of this background, it'll be so easy for us to get these marriages sort of done between one another. But it's becoming extremely difficult, because the reliance is on the individuals of who they know, it's on the families of who they know, and it becomes very difficult when you've only got a small circle of people, or your own local masjid, and you don't know many more people than that, right? So, but what the crisis that I see is the marriages are getting later and later and later. When I used to do marriages about 15 years back, most of them were aged between 22 to about 25, 26. When I was doing marriages about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, a lot of them were now between 24 and about 28, 27, right? And today when I do marriages, unfortunately, is between 28 to about 32 is the average. It's shocking statistics from just 2 decades or within 2 decades. But this shift is happening. And you know what's happening right now is that people after 30, they find that they can't get married, or people are not interested, or they're too fussy. When you have people who are young, they're not so fussy. As they get older and older, they say, no, I want this, I can't be like that, can't be like that, can't be like that. All that. If you get them young and you get them married, it's like, they might say, I don't like this, but you can just push them a bit and say, look, on, you should get on, right? As long as they can, you've got platform for them to get on. Alhamdulillah, they can get on, and they can mold with each other. You just blend in with each other when you're young. You think, okay, let me put up with this, she'll put up with that, and you kind of might move slightly about here and there, but then eventually you kind of blend together. When you're 30 plus, first is to find someone who's of your mindset is very difficult. You're not ready to blend with anyone. They're not ready to blend with anyone. And you've got a lot more divorce cases with those people who get married at a later life. And starting a family at a later life is not a good thing. It should be something that started at an early sort of stage. And what is happening then is, and I'm being serious with this is where it's going. And I want to talk about this today, because you're going to, may Allah forbid us, but this might be the case. I'm seeing these guys, girls who pass 30, they kind of make their mind up, they're not going to get married. There's a lot more individuals now in the 30s, didn't get married, they don't want to get married. Just like some other people in the West, they don't want to get married. They think, well, who cares? What's marriage? Doesn't matter. I don't need a family. You're getting more of these people. What's going to happen next? Well, all sorts of things. Well, already you've got the gay bills going through. You don't know how far that's going to go with these people who are 30-something and they've never been married, where they might end up, who they might end up with. But the crisis is the whole family unit will start breaking, in the sense that you're going to have smaller families or no families at all. Then I'm not saying it's going to happen on a large scale, but even if it happens on a small scale, you still got a crisis. The only way is, my brothers and sisters, is to revert back to the roots of what the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in started off with, and what we need to do in our lives. Now, when I go back to, let me relate all this finally, now I'm going to end now, but finally let me relate back to all of this to Bangladesh. Yes, there is a crisis there, and there has been a crisis, and these clashes, and I feel sorry for all those victims in those places. In that place in Dhaka where they got shot and so on, and many of them who are suffering in Bangladesh at the moment. But what you've got to look at is, you've got to look at the other side of the coin. You've got to look at underneath, where do these social dynamics come from? Where do these people come from? Where do these family units come from? What kind of mentality do they have? What kind of expectation do they have? What kind of education do they have? What kind of spiritual life, whatever, do they have? What kind of attachment? And when they're attached to the religious side, how is it? Is that again the low mentality of education, or is it a high mentality of education? What is it? Because all these factors, with the political factors, they all have a play in what is happening in any part of the world at any time. So with that, my wasiyah is, and it has been my wasiyah, my will to every single individual is, send, we need to change the masjids. Yes, we need to change the communities that we've got. We need to change the expectations we've got. We need to change the society, we change the family life and the way we're getting on together. We need to change the individual times that we're spending. We need to change the spiritual and the devoted time that we've got. We need to have expectations high. We do need to look at the political areas of life, but with the right vision. With the right vision and with the right sort of sense of having unity and oneness together. And with that spiritual soul is really essential, because a lot of the parts of the world, they have got a political influence and an intellectual mind, but they haven't got a spiritual soul. If we can reverse it in this way and make a difference within our communities, then Allah Azza wa Jalla has said in the Holy Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah does not change a nation until the nation changes itself. So the change is on us to find a greater change in the future, and inshallah bi'idhnillah, we pray to Allah Azza wa Jalla that He will change it for us over here and for all the Muslims and so on across the globe. Inshallah bi'idhnillah. Jazakumullah khair wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
الذكر علم ونور الحاملات سنا ونور والرسمات هنا سرور يا حلوات تلك السنين.